It wasn't designed like that. No one was thinking of motorcyclists or people in convertibles. And it took his head off. What's up, guys? So today I want to talk about a serious subject relating to cars and some things that quite frankly can kill you. Because I've got a story where frankly that happened. So I'm not going to be my normal super happy self, but this is something you all need to know because there's one single most important thing with cars and motorcycles that can completely ruin your day or end your career on this earth, shall we say. And I got a story that goes back to when I lived in the Columbus area some years ago. I'm trying to remember when this was exactly. I think this was like 2013 or 2014. I had my Viper, the GTS hardtop, for a good number of years before that and drove it a lot. And did really well with it. As you guys remember from an earlier video where I talked about Widowmaker cars, and basically that people say they're so hard to drive, basically can't drive. There's one exception to that I would like to make, but really when you operate a motor vehicle, it still comes down to the guy behind the trigger. You know what I mean? You need to make good decisions and have enough talent level based upon your driving. And cars like this, or new supercars and such, have the ability to go way past most people's talent levels. That's the point about that video. However, so this story, I had, this is when I had my Viper, and then actually got in an accident, which had nothing to do with me. There was a person that tried to blaze across 5 lanes of traffic on Sawmill. I had no idea someone would try to do that right there where it was illegal, and just didn't expect it or see it coming, and I couldn't avoid it and slid into that car. That person was cited. It was absolutely not my fault, and I couldn't avoid it. So those things can happen, and obviously poor drivers is, I guess, the first topic of conversation we should bring up. You know, people like to vilify cars like this. Oh, you were speeding, you're so dangerous. No, I wasn't. I was actually driving around legally. Of course, cars like this, people with sports cars, we like to enjoy them, and sometimes people like to go reasonably quickly. So my suggestion to all those people is that a racetrack is a good idea, an autocross is a good idea, and places where there are no people or personal property is also a good idea. So let's all be smart. And you have to be so careful of other drivers, most especially on a motorcycle, because motorcycle stopping distances aren't that great. Sports cars can stop better. I mean, I've gone way faster around mid-Ohio in cars than I have on motorcycles. I'll put it that way. Motorcycles are fast in a straight line, but you know, they've got issues. You got to watch people at intersections. You know, I had a young friend of mine many years ago that got killed on a motorcycle. Somebody turned left in front of him. All of my cars that have ever been totaled on the street or wrecked were because someone made an illegal traffic maneuver. They didn't stop at a traffic light. They blazed across 5 lanes of traffic where they weren't legally allowed to. They made illegal lane changes and weren't paying attention. Absolutely none of the times I've ever been in an accident had to do with someone losing control. It had to do with somebody making a very bad judgment call in just traffic signals. So keep that in mind. But the story I want to bring up that relates to something about a car that can actually end up being fatal. And this is something that I heard of and then confirmed. And there's kind of almost feels like a cover-up with this story. I don't know if it is, but it was interesting. So at that time, I had heard that somebody got killed driving a Viper, and that they slid off and went into some barrier and got killed. And then it was an early Viper. It was an RT10. That was the open cockpit one, where it's like, you know, targa roof. It's not a convertible because it's got a back, but it's open top, and it has no traction control or ABS. And those early Vipers, you know, when they were new, people get excited and go crazy and then lose it and have no talent and wreck. But in this circumstance, I feel like that wasn't actually the case. And the reason I bring it up is because vintage cars, Vipers are now effectively vintage. The early 90s was a long time ago. The 80s was a long time ago. Or, especially for tires. I want to bring that up. These are the current wheels and tires I have on my Viper. I changed the wheel size because the old wheel size, which was 17 inch, I could only get one type of tire in that size. And Lamborghini Countaches also have that problem. There's only one type of tire that fits them, and they're only made every so often. So on a Countach that's old and super valuable, the company might make a production run of them and then people hoard them, and the tire might look good, but it's 25 years old and hard as a rock. So this tire and wheel is the old tire and wheels off my Viper. I had them power coated, so let's get past the Subaru jokes. And this is actually a front tire and wheel, so that's why it's so much narrower. But this tire now is hard as a rock. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but if I tried to drive on this thing, like on the street, if I tried to drive on that, I would pull out of the parking lot just gently and it would spin the tires. And you'd have to be mindful just to get this crusty layer off, which doesn't seem crusty to an average person looking at it, but it's hard as a rock. And the other thing, if you look at this, and you guys got to be careful with your cars, your sports cars, your vintage cars, are dry cracking. If your tire is starting to crack, okay, yeah, it may work and it may be superficial and all, and I've done plenty of things on stuff that's crappy, but that's telling you something. That's telling you that your tire no longer has the elasticity. It's just no longer doing it. You're not going to have the right amount of grip. The other thing, so here's the new tire, right? It's not cracked and stuff. You can see I've obviously driven on the street. It's got a little bit of wear and whatnot, but I mean, I can just feel it so much softer. And that's a huge thing, because here's the deal. So these old tires, if I put them on my Viper right now, and in a really gritty surface where there's just really good friction to grip, I can roll into the throttle hard in first gear and not spin the tires. You can't just stomp it and floor it. Second gear, you pedal a little bit, you get into it hard, you're not spinning tires. Third, fourth gear, straight line, no problem at all. But if I had these things in it, I would be blowing the tires off in first, second, and spinning it to third all the way to 80 miles an hour. And if somebody's not experienced at driving, you're gonna get out of shape, sideways, all over the place, going crazy. It still comes down to the driver, because when I have crappy tires, I just, spin them and drive them at the limit. It's not a big deal. I know what the level of friction is. But the point is this, these old cars and vintage cars and supercars, people keep for a long, long, long time, heirlooms. And the car looks good and it's shiny, it's pretty, and it runs good and it's real exciting and the brakes still work. But what happens is somebody doesn't drive it in a year and nobody's put tires on the thing in 10 or 15 years, new tires, even put armor on and look all shiny. And then somebody's all excited, it's a beautiful sunny summer day, and you go zooming out, getting on that on-ramp and wow, like this. And you end up sideways at 75 miles an hour and you lose your supercar. Because you have no idea how important tires are. Tires are everything in racing. Everything. I don't care if you have a good car. If you got crappy tires, what are you going to do? You can't stop, you can't turn, you can't go. And you guys might, well, it's real exciting. I like to spin my tires and get all sideways and crazy and do donuts and stuff. Well, okay, yeah, that could be fun. But it makes for a crappy driving experience. Tires are everything, you guys. You've got to keep that in mind. This is the biggest tip I can give you. And I'll be frank, I have driven some crappy tires on my Viper in the past. So look how wide this is. That is a rear tire. I don't even remember how wide they are. Let's find out. They are 355s. That is pretty darn wide. Now the thing about this is, this width is not good for pushing water out of the way. Just let's not even talk about snow, but not that great about pushing water out of the way. If this was a narrower tire, it'd do better at not hydroplaning. But this thing is like made to hydroplane. Even though the company as well like putting grooves and stuff in it and doing everything. But that's why cars like this don't necessarily do very well in the rain. And also because there's no weight transfer. They're sprung hard, like a go-kart. So the second they break loose, they slide, and you got to know what you're doing. So you can't judge them by normal car characteristics. And you have to realize that these big wide tires are great when they're great and horrific when they're not. Even temperature. So sometimes I'll drive the Viper if it's cold out, as long as the roads are clear and everything like that. But gosh, if it's mid to low 40s Fahrenheit or lower, if I just pull away gingerly from a stop, it'll spin the tires a bit. I have to be mindful. If it's cold out and I'm driving, forget about precipitation or anything like that. I have to be mindful just because of the temperature of the tires. These are summer tires. They're made for that. They're not winter tires. Winter tires are made of compounds of rubber, so they're softer in the winter and better. Okay, so you got to think about that with things like all season or winter tires or summer tires. That's why summer tires are horrific in the winter and cold. Think about those things, you guys. It's super important. So the story, it's not about that wreck and the person that pulled out in front of me and the other person that pulled out in front of me and the person that pulled out in front of my old friend, who's no longer, because that person pulled out in front of them in a motorcycle, is when you're out driving and riding, watch the intersections. Holy crap. Watch those blind corners. And just expect that everybody's going to do something dumb. Doesn't mean you have to drive with less confidence or have less fun. You just have to expect that and ride and drive in that way. You also have to always be aware of your limit, and so you don't do something bad. And you need to have good, fresh equipment. You do. If you're an older person and you've got a really neat car, a muscle car, or something like that, and by the way, this is why I think older timers, like, baby boomer generation and stuff, are so excited about their cars in the 60s. They're like, we have big engines and you can spin a tire through all the gears at any speed. That's because your tire technology sucked back then. Yeah, drag radials, whatever. But that was the thing. But here's where I'm going with it. If you're an older person, you have a really neat car, and you've had it in your collection for a long time, and you pampered it, looks great, runs great, shines great, it's got real low miles, and you think you're going to do a favor by letting a young person take a go in it. Maybe go to prom, go out to dinner, just have a nice joyride on a summer day. But you haven't put tires on that thing in 10 or 20 years, you're setting them up for a big problem. So the story with the RT10 Viper, the old one, there was, if I'm not getting the details mistaken, there was a young man who drove this car, and he came blazing down an on-ramp, one that curved, and then I've been on myself. I've never had a problem with it. But he probably got in that straight section, got repping through first and second gear, spin the tires. Maybe he got in a third. I don't know. Bet he was doing 70 miles an hour when he hit that last corner. Car stepped up, got away from him. He didn't hold the slide. Because when tires get old and hard, they don't act the way you think they're going to in a slide. I had a Corvette back when, a C6 Corvette with the stock run flat tires, and they're old as can be, because the guy I bought it from had no miles on it, and they were the original tires. And they were absolute, complete garbage. When they broke loose, it wasn't reasonably predictable. It wasn't the car, it was the tires. Literally in a stock C6 Corvette, I was getting on it, it was cool out in traffic on the highway, and that thing stepped out sideways. I couldn't believe it. I ended up putting the turn signal on, changing lanes. Thankfully, there's no one around. I didn't even expect it. And I drive a lot of fast stuff. So tires are everything. So this young man, he was driving real hard, I'm thinking, and I don't know if he had old tires on it. And I don't know if he was going real fast. But I got a sneaking suspicion. And he loses it. There's another part of this story. He would have been fine, even if he hit a wall or guardrail or spun off into the grass. Maybe he spun off in the grass, they just hosed the car off, he'd be all nervous and wouldn't drive the car again. If he put it into a wall, he might have totaled it, might have screwed it up, might have got bumped and bruised and go to the emergency room, same as guardrail. But there was something that started to be built and used a lot back in, I think, 2012 or 13, and those were those cable guardrails. Those cable barriers you see on the highway. They're posts, and they have these big, thick cables, there's like 3 of them. And the reason those things came out back when I saw them, I'm like, those things look dangerous. And I looked them up, and the whole point of it was if a car is driving along or a semi-trailer and goes off the road and hits these things, the impact just doesn't bounce like off something hard. So it'll hit this and then smoothly get back on the road. And that was kind of the point. They didn't want it like bouncing and glancing off of them. But I'm looking at this going, my God, I hope to hell I'm riding a motorcycle. I never touch one of those things or I'm done. That will tear a person up. You're just shot. I heard in Germany they don't want to put those cable barriers up for that reason. And I thought the same thing with cars, frankly, because I'd start seeing ones that were hit, and what happened is a semi-truck or a truck or something would hit those posts. And then when you'd be driving, you see the cable barriers, they'd all be like, down. They'd all be falling down. It's sort of like Christmas tree lights that are wired in a series instead of parallel. When one goes out, the whole string goes out. So when you lose part of it, the whole thing falls down. It's not effective, which is no good because you don't even have a barrier there at all. But I was looking at these cables and seeing the lowest level is about this high off the ground. And I was thinking the nose of my stock Corvette is about this high off the ground. If I went into that, I'm going right underneath. And the top comes off that thing. Well, there's a lot of cars like that made. A lot of stock cars. I'm not even talking super sports cars. My wife's got a BMW Z3. It's just cute, kind of bopping around car. It's a convertible, and it's low. It'd go right under there. Miata, lots of sports cars, the new Corvette, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, you name it. About any sports car, any convertible. I don't care if it's a Buick convertible. If you hit it right, you're going under. What do you think that cable's going to do? It's going to come right over the windshield. And then people are going to talk about how the French used to use capital punishment pre-like 1980 something. And that's what happened to this poor young person. My guess is they were old bad tires and he lost it because he was excited. Went into a barrier that wasn't designed like that. No one was thinking of motorcyclists or people in convertibles. And it took his head off. It didn't get reported. It's very quiet. And I thought that was weird. Nobody reported on it. Somebody gets their head taken off in a cable barrier. And I looked it up. I saw on forums, the saddest thing I've ever seen was, and this is a horrible aspect of the internet. So when this car got wrecked, because that individual, and I'm saying that so as not to sound, I'm saying that because I'm calling them an individual, blazed across 5 lanes of traffic illegally and was cited. My car got totaled. If I was driving something else or I was riding a motorcycle, I might have gotten totaled. But those people vilified me because I was the one driving a fancy, fast sports car. Therefore, it must have been my fault. Whoa. No, thank you very much. And somebody on the internet with this person who got killed in that Viper through unfortunate circumstances basically just went on a rant how there's some rich prick punk and they deserved what they got. Well, I don't think they did deserve what they got. I think that's super unfortunate meeting of a lot of circumstances. I don't think those cable barriers were great. I think they're dangerous if you hit them in the right way. It has nothing to do with the car you drive. Hey, for anybody. And I think maybe, even if that car was maintained perfectly, had fresh rubber on it, a person got excited and drove past the limit, drove past their talent level. But if it was the tires and they were old, like so many of these vintage cars are, I remember seeing an old guy coming up to me at a car show. Has a Viper, one owner, no miles on it, original tires. It's crazy, it'll spin the tires in 6 gears. I'm like, that's because your tires are hard as a rock. If you did a burnout, they'd probably spark. Anyway, so that really bugged me, you guys. And I don't know, I was feeling all like small town frustrated housewife with it. I ended up calling a couple news outlets and I said, hey, there's a wreck and it was horrific and here's what happened and I think these barriers are unsafe and I think that's a news story you guys should look into. Because to be perfectly honest, freaked me out driving a Corvette. I'm like, if the freaking city, government, whatever, DOT is putting up these barriers and there's a major flaw that can kill people, then I think people should like give that into consideration. And then of course my mind starts playing, well, were they cheaper? Who's getting paid to put these horrible things up? You know, I don't even know. I came to learn later, I'm not sure if this is true, but apparently they're more expensive than guardrails. I'm like, wow. And so there's a lot of controversy about that. So one of the news places comes out and interviews me relating to safety and my thought as a sports car driver and all. And they were gonna run it the next day. And the other ones called and the news agencies or whatever talked to me and they confirmed what happened to that young person and his grim outcome, that it did in fact happen. And they go to run it and then everybody drops it. The story vanishes and never was told. Strange, strange. I'm not gonna say anything, I'm not gonna point fingers because it could be anything. But I think YouTube is a nice opportunity to bring this up now because I want to see you guys all have a good time and be safe. Cable barriers, I don't have a lot of control over, but there's things out there that maybe are for safety that could be dangerous. So you got to watch out for that. The best safety with anything is not putting yourself in a bad position. And if you've got a vintage sports car or supercar, I don't care if you're driving an Austin Healey 3000. If you're running Michelins that are 30 years old, you better change those things. If you got a Countach and your Pirellis are 30 years old but they look good, they're not good. You need to change them. And if you're in a Dodge Viper with that much torque, and you've got tires that are old, I don't give a crap if they're expensive. If you're going to drive that, if you're ever going to let anybody else drive it, you need to have good tires. Again, you guys, this isn't by no means a fault of the car. But for all of us out there with sports cars and vintage cars and stuff, if you're going to enjoy something and you're going to do it responsibly, then you need to drive it well and you need to keep it maintained well. Because the first best way to be safe and never get hurt or killed is to never get in an accident. And that comes down to the driver. Having a good mechanic helps a lot too. So anyway, guys, that's my talk for today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. That you will like it, comment, and subscribe. See you guys next time.